Okay, so I'm going to do an experiment now to test some alkanes, or test an alkane with various different reagents so that we can decide whether we think alkanes are reactive or not. So my first test is to put some alkane with some water. So this is my alkane. As you can see, it's quite runny, so it doesn't want to even stay in the dropper very well. It's dripping a little bit out of the dropper. Okay, that's the alkane. You might be able to see that it's called pentane, so you might be able to figure out how many carbons are in that alkane. My pentane is now in the test tube there. I'm going to add some water. I don't know how well you can see this. I might need to hold something dark behind it, like my top. I don't know if you can see there are two layers there. It doesn't mix very well. I don't think you can see it terribly clearly. I can see there's a line about there where they aren't quite mixed. I don't know if that's showing up on the film clip, never mind. But there's no obvious reaction there. It's not bubbling or fizzing, it's not got warm, and I can see anyway that there are two layers in that, so it doesn't appear to be doing anything. My second test is to try burning my pentane and to see whether it gives a nice clean flame or if there's a lot of soot coming off it. So the way I'm going to do that is to dip a wooden splint into the bottle, into the pentane, so that the splint is all covered in pentane, and I shall put it into the Bunsen flame. There we are. So that was it, burnt quite quickly, and there wasn't really, you can see the splint smoking now, but there wasn't really any soot that came off that. It was a relatively clean flame. Let's try it again so you can see a bit more detail. There. Okay. It ignites really, really quickly, but not too much in the way of smoke coming off that. Okay, so I'm going to try the next experiment on the sheet, which is to react my alkane pentane with this stuff, which is bromine water. Now, I've already put a little bit of pentane into my test tube here, so I'm going to add my bromine water to it. And we can see if there's any reaction. Okay. Now, I'm just going to put some white paper behind because I think it makes it clearer to see. You can see there's that really strong yellow colour from the bromine. Okay. This is quite interesting because if I shake it, the bromine dissolves better in the pentane than it does in the water. So you can see now it's moved into that top layer, so it's really good evidence about the layers that we were looking for earlier. You can see that there's a slightly darker colour in the top layer and it's moved out of the bottom layer. But the colour is still there, and that's what's interesting to us because the bromine hasn't reacted, and that colour, that yellow colour there, is showing me that the bromine hasn't reacted. Now, if it were a sunnier day today, I'd be able to take this outside into the sunlight and see whether it did anything, but unfortunately I've chosen a day when it's really wet. So we're going to use a UV light and shine a UV light on this to see whether it makes any difference if the sunlight gets on it. So I'm just going to move this over to the side, and I'm going to get my lab technician to help me to shine this UV light onto my mixture, and we're going to keep holding it there in that UV light, shaking it and shining that UV torch straight on it there. Okay, let's have it so we can see the blue tinge on the paper like that. Is that okay? Okay, so we're going to, it might take about 5 minutes, so we're going to leave it for a while and come back to it. Okay, so we've been doing this for about 5 minutes now, so I'm hoping that this will have been enough to work. So if we just remove the UV light and take a look at it now, and you can see that that yellowy orange colour that we were observing before seems to have gone. So that's evidence that there has been a reaction, but it wasn't reacting to begin with. It needed the UV light on it before it did anything. Okay, so we're going to do another reaction now with our alkane, our pentane. I'm going to try adding some magnesium ribbon to it. So we know magnesium ribbon from other reactions that we've done by putting it with acid and so on. We know that magnesium is quite a reactive metal, so we'll see if we can use that to persuade our alkane to react. Let's give it quite a bit of alkane. We'll drop a piece of magnesium ribbon in there and see if there's any evidence of the magnesium fizzing or doing anything interesting. There we are. Oh dear, that seems to be very disappointing. It's not doing anything. No fizzing, No change of colour, nothing. Nothing happening. Okay. The final stage of these experiments, I'm going to try testing my alkane here with some alkali and with some acid. So I've got two separate test tubes here ready. I'll put my alkane, my pentane, into each of those tubes. There's some in the first one. There's some in the second one. Okay. Let's try. I think the acid is the first reaction on the sheet, so we'll do that one first. I'll pop some acid in on top of my alkane. Well, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of anything happening there. No fizzing, no colour change. Hasn't got warm. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. Let's try adding some alkali to the other one. That also appears to be doing absolutely nothing. There's no fizzing, nothing. Hasn't got warm, no colour change. Most disappointing, I think.